In this episode, I'm going to be showing you the latest addition to my Masso CNC controller. It's this, a wireless pendant. Hello fellow CNC nuts and welcome. In this episode we're taking a look at this. It's a wireless pendant for use with my Masso CNC controller. It has all the same functions that this here has, with the exception of an e-stop switch. This one here does not have the e-stop switch, whereas the genuine Masso hardwired pendant does have one. If you require an e-stop switch on your pendant, then this is not for you. On the other hand, if you're like me and have e-stops all around the machine and only need this to move the axes around, then this is well worth considering. So it has all the other functions that the other pendant has. It has the switch here where you can select which particular axis you want to move, be it the x-axis, the y-axis, or the z-axis. And you can select the resolution that you want it to move at. So I can select ×1, which is fine movement, ×10, which is a medium movement, and ×100, which is a very coarse movement. Now I should also point out that this is a third-party device. It's not supported by Masso. It just happens to be one I purchased and that actually works. Something else to consider though is that it is actually made by a company whose name I cannot pronounce, WIXHC, and they are a maker of pendants for professional machines, and this is a really solid and sturdy pendant, I have to say. I don't think it's going to give me any trouble at all. Now this pendant comes in two parts. We've got this here, which is the hand controller, and the second part is this. It's the receiver. This is the bit that actually connects to the Masso unit. Now I got a bit curious and opened it up for a look inside, which probably didn't do my warranty much good, but it's really well made inside. I can see it's optically isolated and they've gone to a lot of trouble making this properly. Now on the outside of the box here is a wiring diagram showing what all the wires that in this cable going off to Masso actually do. The other end of the cable is simply terminated with bootlace connectors on the ends, and each wire is individually labelled so you know what it does. I purchased a DB15 screw connector block, which I'm going to use to connect this here into my Masso. I'm doing that so it's as easy to do as possible. Okay, well without further ado, let's look at wiring it up. So to wire this up and keep it as simple as possible, I purchased one of these here. It's a DB15 connector, and it's already wired out to these screw terminals here. I can then take the wires that were on the end of my receiver cable and connect them in here. Now I've already weeded out this one here. This is the 5-volt power supply, and I've just taken it outside here. I need to feed that separately because there's no 5-volt power supply available from this connector here on Masso. Now my original plan was, because these bootlaces are a little bit too long to fit in here and fit within the block here, my plan was to simply cut it like so, halfway up, and then screw it into the terminal there. But unfortunately they fall off when you do that. You can see that there was no wire stripped back there, so even if I had gone through and pre-crimped it here before I cut it, it would have been no good. I would have just been crimping insulation. So while I've got that off now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten down this label here, because it doesn't need to be as big as it is, but I'd like to retain the label if I can. It might prove to be useful one day. So I'm just going to slide that back on, and this one here is the y-axis wire. Now using my pliers there, I'm going to strip back the last 4 or 5 millimeters of insulation from my wire, And then using my diagram here I got off the Masso website, I can see that the y-axis connects to terminal 9. Each of the terminals in here is numbered, and terminal 9 is right at the front there. So I'm just going to take my wire, put it in here and screw it up. Now check that it's in good, it's not coming out, that's excellent. Now it's important to note that even though I don't have an e-stop switch on this particular pendant, the e-stop still goes through the pendant. So what I need to do is I need to put a link in that links between pin 13 and 14. For that, I'm just going to use a little piece of wire like this. With that done, I can now close up the little case here. So now it's time to connect this up. Now something I forgot to do before was insert these here. These are the retaining screws. So I open it back up and put them back in place. This simply plugs in here and we can use the retaining screws to hold it in place like so. Now that leaves us here with the 5-volt power supply that this here needs to work. And here I have a 5-volt power supply that's already built into my console unit here, so I'm simply going to connect that up like so and screw them together. Now when it comes to providing 5-volt power supply to the receiver unit, you've got a couple of choices. You can do as I'm doing and use something like this here. It's a small 5-volt regulator board. It takes my 12-volt supply out of Masso, converts it down to 5 volts. The other option is something like this here, a completely separate power supply here. It provides me with 5 volts here. No matter what type of device you use to provide the 5 volts, the important thing is that the negative side of the power supply connects to the negative wire of Masso. And don't use these black connectors here to do that. Go right back to the negative rail of your main power supply and connect it there. That is not what these terminals are for. Okay, well, we're ready to turn it on and give it a try. Okay, well that's working fine. No real surprise there, but let's take a wee look at the pendant. This knob here actually has an off position here, so you can turn it off and save batteries. It comes with a rubber boot, and if you peel the boot off like so, you'll find that behind here is a battery compartment in which I put 2 AA batteries. Now if you believe the documentation, it's meant to last a bit over 2 months. I imagine that will depend on how much you use it and whether you turn it off when you finish using it. It's quite good that it comes with this boot. So the rubber boot can be a little bit hard to get on and off, but it has built into the back of it magnets as well. So if your machine happens to have a metal cabinet, then you can stick it straight to it. If on the other hand your cabinet is not metal, then they also provide this here, a wee bracket that you can hang the pendant on. It also comes with this little booklet here, which is written entirely in Chinese and doesn't really tell you a lot at all. Now the critical decision I had to make when purchasing this was which receiver should I get, because it's the receiver that interfaces with the Masso unit. The actual hand pendant itself are identical, and there were 3 to choose from. I chose this one here, the WGP01. It required a 5-volt power supply, which I wasn't overly happy about, but the 12-volt version of this here only provided 25 pulses per revolution for the encoder, which meant I would have to turn the encoder at least 4 times faster to get it moving at all. The WGP03 also did not look like it was the correct one. This is the one I chose, it's the one I've connected, and it works. There may be others that will work with Masso, but this one definitely does. Okay, so just a quick final look at the pendant here and some of the features on it. It does have this on-off switch here, and when you turn it on, this red light lights up showing it's powered on. Now when you turn the dial, the light next to it turns on, and that indicates that it's talking to the receiver. If the receiver's unplugged, that light doesn't light up. So if the light's not lighting up when you turn the dial, you know it's not talking to the receiver. Lastly, next to it is a low power indication for when the batteries get flat. Apparently the batteries are meant to last about 2 months, but that will of course depend on how much you use it and whether you remember to turn it off when you're finished. If you don't use it for a while, it is meant to go into a sleep mode. According to the manufacturer, the pendant should have a working distance of 40 meters. That's over 130 feet. So I took it for a wee walk out to the front of the property and out onto the street, 40 meters away, and I made use of the pendant. Unbelievably, when I got back into the workshop, the gantry had moved to where I'd asked it to. So it definitely has a long range. For those who want to try one of these here out, I'll do a wiring diagram showing how I wired it up on my Masso unit, and I'll also put a link to where I purchased mine as well. And that's where I'm going to leave this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, maybe giving you something new to think about. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Cheers.